So as you all know, long ago I have forfeited the idea of speaking Spanish like a native. I don't have that as a goal anymore. I don't criticize myself for not sounding like a native because I'm not a native Spanish speaker. It just, sure, it could happen, but that's when I say it could happen. Me achieving a level of Spanish in which I'm perceived as a native could happen, but that's not my goal anymore. But I still like to say things in a way that sound natural or native like. Again, I know I'm contradicting myself, but here's an example of this. You guys know I teach English to high schoolers, students that come to the United States and that don't speak English as a first language, or students that just qualify for those services. And like a week and a half ago, I have a student from West Africa, and he basically says something, and I looked at him, I'm like, how do you know that? Like, how do you know to say that? How do you know to even say that in English? I didn't teach you that. And he speaks English very well. I'm very proud of him. He's watching this video. I'm very proud of you. You know who. But he speaks English very well, but he does have a little accent. Because of his native language, he does have a little accent, but he speaks English very well. And so my point in bringing him up is when he said that, I was just like, it's so cool to myself. I didn't tell him this, but in my head, I was just like, this, it's so cool that he can say these things. He has that in his repertoire, if that's a word. He has the ability to use that. And even though when I hear him speak, I don't think he's a native English speaker, it's just cool to hear him say something that's so deeply rooted in native English vernacular. And so that gave me the idea to do this video. And so in this video, I want to talk about some things that you can include in your Spanish, some words, some phrases, some sentence structures that you can incorporate in your Spanish that may not have the same effect that my student's phrase had when he said it in English, but there are phrases that sound more natural, more native-like, that I oftentimes hear those of us that are non-native Spanish speakers say that we could change up a little bit to make us sound a little bit better. And so long story short, I just want to go over some things that you can say, some ways that you can phrase things in Spanish that will sound a little bit more native-like, sound a little bit better. And just, these are tools that you want to have in your Spanish. So the first thing is a specific use of por qué. You guys know, depending on how you say it, depending on how you perceived what I just said, por qué can mean, por qué is because. If you say por qué, it's why also, okay? So most of you are familiar with por qué. Por qué, because, por qué, why. There is another use of that a lot of native Spanish speakers use, that a lot of us when we're learning Spanish don't implement, but we should. Here, I'll give you a sentence first, and then I'll actually possibly include a little clip here, and then I'll explain it further. But here's a perfect example. Tú no tienes por qué hablarme así. Tú no tienes por qué hablarme de esa manera. No te hice nada, entonces no entiendo por qué me estás hablando así. Tú no tienes por qué hablarme de esa manera. Okay? What I'm saying is, you don't have, in that sentence, and those of you that understand Spanish kind of know what just happened there. When you say por qué in that context can mean you don't have a reason to, okay? And so what I literally said was, tú no tienes por qué hablarme así. And so literally the translation for that will be, you don't have the why, you don't have the why to talk to me like that. But really what I'm communicating is you don't have a reason to be talking to me like that. You don't have the right to be thinking that, okay? I could also say, tú no tienes por qué venir a mi casa a esta hora. Like, you don't have a why to come to my house at this time. But what I'm basically communicating is you don't have the right, or there's no good reason for you to be coming to my house at this time. So the use of por qué in that context is something that native Spanish speakers use a lot, but I don't hear non-native Spanish speakers, aka native English speakers that have learned Spanish. I don't hear us say that a lot. I try to sprinkle it through my Spanish a lot because I learned it through this video.
Un buen saludo a mis abuelitos para que, no sé, obviamente para que Dios quiera y todo eso.
Claro. ¿Qué le pediste al niño Dios?
Que siempre los cuide y que cuando llegue su hora, que descansen en paz.
¿Por qué, papá, piensas en eso? Luego los abuelitos, ¿dónde están?
Por allá están en el campo disfrutando. Y además tienen que hacer un par de trabajos.
Sí, pero están bien, que es lo importante.
Sí, señor.
Entonces tú no tienes por qué llorar, tienes que estar feliz, ¿o no?
Son sentimientos.
So yes, after watching that video, I texted some of my Colombian friends. I'm like, why is he saying, tú no tienes por qué llorar? And they were like, no, they're just telling him, like, you don't have a reason to be crying. Like, you shouldn't be crying. So tener por qué is like to have a reason, or like you shouldn't, or you should. Or if I say, like, tú tienes por qué quejarte. Tú tienes por qué tú tienes por qué quejarte. You have a reason. You have the why to complain. Like you're in the right to complain. You have the right to complain. You have a reason to complain. So that's I almost dropped my phone. That's the first one. El por qué. El por qué. Tú no tienes por qué llorar. Tú no tienes por qué hablarme así. Tú tienes por qué quejarte. Okay? The second one, a lot of you guys already know this, so I'll go through this one very quickly. But instead of saying I want to, instead of always communicating the idea of wanting to do something, using the verb querer, instead of always saying yo quiero, or yo quiero, or say él quiere, or ella quiere, just simply replace querer with the phrase tener ganas de. Tener ganas de. And so, okay, so again, tener ganas de means like to have the desire to have ganas, like eagerness, desire, okay? I don't know how to translate ganas. How do you translate ganas? But like tener ganas de. I love Spanish. You see, I'm just smiling thinking about that. I love this language learning stuff. But yeah, tener ganas de. En vez de decir querer, que usen tener ganas de. So if I want to say, I want to visit Costa Rica this year, instead of saying quiero visitar Costa Rica este año, I can say tengo ganas de visitar Costa Rica este año. Tengo ganas de. I have the desire to. I have the want to. It's, again, such a subtle thing. These are not literally word for word synonyms, but they communicate the same idea. But tener ganas de, sprinkled into your Spanish, it can elevate it, it can refine it, it can make it sound a little bit more native. Like, again, we're never going to be native speakers, but it can make it sound a little bit more metido, a little bit more polished, a little bit more, you're going to sound like you know more if you use tener ganas de sometimes, en vez de nada más siempre decir quiero, 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 instead of always saying querer. The other one is another small little replacement here, okay? Let's say you wanted to say that someone got mad yesterday, okay? The verb for getting mad is enojarse, enojarse. And so if I want to say my cousin got mad yesterday, I could say mi primo se enojó ayer. Mi primo se enojó ayer. I can say that, right? But something that a lot of Spanish speakers do, and that you should implement too as well, is you should start using, literally the translation for this would be put one's self, okay? Ponerse. And so what am I saying? Instead of just saying él se enojó ayer, you can say él se puso enojado. Like, that basically, literally word for word is he put himself mad, but that communicates he got himself mad, like he got upset, okay? Like, to me, se enojó y se puso enojado, they're the same, but I can't even articulate the nuance and the nuance and the difference there, but it does somewhat communicate something differently to me. I can't articulate it, but it is a better way. Let me not say better. It's just a different way, but to me a more natural way, sprinkled into your Spanish. Not always. I'm not saying that you should never say él se enojó. Sometimes you want to say él se enojó, but you could also say él se puso enojado. He put himself, he got himself mad. Se puso bravo. Se puso feliz. Like he got himself happy. He made himself happy. He put himself happy. He got happy. Okay, so ponerse. Again, another example. I can say, instead of saying, this is a good example. This is a perfect example. Instead of saying estoy feliz cada vez que como helado, Like instead of saying I'm happy every time I eat ice cream, you could say me pongo feliz. Like I put myself happy. To me, that just sounds a little better, a little bit more natural in Spanish. Me pongo feliz. Me pongo. I just heard something over there. Maybe an animal. But me pongo feliz cada vez que como helado. Me pongo. I put myself. Okay, and that's a better way of saying I get happy. Yeah, it's like I get happy, not I am happy. I get happy. That's a better way of describing it. Like I get happy, I get sad. Me pongo. O sea, me pongo triste cuando veo fotos del desastre. Like I get sad every time I see pictures of the disaster. This next one really grinds my gears, and it grinds my gears because I understand why we do it. I understand I understand tangibly because I used to do this, and I don't even think I don't think it's actually grammatically incorrect in Spanish, but it's just not natural. It's not what native Spanish speakers say. So here's what I always hear when I ask someone, how long have you been learning Spanish? If I ask them in Spanish, ¿cuánto tiempo tienes aprendiendo español? Or I can say, ¿cuánto tiempo llevas aprendiendo español? That question. I always hear this, and if you've said this, I'm not picking on you. This is tough love. This is criticism that hopefully will help you guys. We can help each other. I'm not perfect. But you don't want to say this. In English, if I say, how long have you been learning Spanish? You would say, I have been learning Spanish for 2 months. I have been learning Spanish for 8 years. I have been learning Spanish for, that's how you phrase that sentence. I have been learning Spanish. I have been learning. In Spanish, that would be, he estado estudiando español por, and I guess that's right. Native Spanish speakers, help me out here. Is that correct? I don't even think it's correct. I used to say that, but I don't think it's correct to describe a time period of doing something. But I mean, they understand. Se entiende. Like I understand even when you guys say that. Because I used to say it. He estado estudiando español por un año. Por un año. He estado estudiando español por un año y medio. Chicos, que no digan eso. Que dejen de decir eso. Que no digan eso. Please don't say that. Please don't say that. To communicate that you've been, I'm sure you can say that, but again, we're trying to elevate our Spanish right now, you know? We're not trying to sound like we're learners. Like it's okay to have an accent, but we want to sound like we're comfortable. We want people to be like, oh, he speaks Spanish. Yeah, he has an accent, but he speaks Spanish like very well, okay? En vez de decir, he estado estudiando español por, instead of saying, or in place of saying, I have been studying Spanish for that amount of time, you want to say, yo tengo, let's say you've been learning Spanish for 2 years. You want to say, yo tengo 2 años estudiando español. For time, like time that you've accumulated doing something, you use the verb tener. Like that's how native Spanish speakers say that. There's another way, I'll tell you in 1 second, but they say tener. They don't say he estado estudiando. I mean, I guess they do. I've heard some of them say it, but that's not common, in my opinion, según lo que tengo entendido. The other way to say that also, that communicates the same idea and it's more native-like, is again, instead of saying he estado estudiando, say llevo 2 años estudiando español. Llevo 2 años estudiando español. And so, even if you're talking about waiting somewhere, instead of saying he estado aquí esperando, that sounds a little bit more normal. That actually sounds normal. He estado aquí esperando por como 5 minutos. But like that sounds kind of normal, but even in that case, you could say, como tengo 5 minutos aquí esperándote. In that case, though, to be honest, the first one kind of sounds more normal and natural to me. My natural, my Spanish intuition at my advanced level now is what refines itself with time. And I just kind of get a feel for what sounds normal to me, and that kind of sounds normal. Like if you arrive late somewhere and you're like, how long have you been here? ¿Por cuánto tiempo me esperabas? Pues he estado aquí por como 5 minutos. That sounds normal to me. But you could also say like, llevo 5 minutos aquí esperándote. Tengo 5 minutos aquí esperándote. But for that question that we always get, how long have you been studying Spanish? Let's, instead of saying, he estado estudiando español por, let's change that to llevo, if you've been studying, me in my case. At the end of this month, it'll be 5 years. So I can say, llevo 5 años estudiando español. Tengo 5 años estudiando español. Instead of, en vez de, ¿qué dicen? he estado estudiando español por 5 años. Suena más natural decir llevo o tengo. The next one, if you're talking about something that happened and I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example. If you were in a tough situation, let's say your life took a turn for the worse and you were in a tough situation 3 years ago, okay? What a lot of us that are not native Spanish speakers want to say, and it's okay to say this, but what we would say is, what we would do is we would translate literally, I was in a tough situation, estuve en una situación difícil, o estuve en una situación dura, okay? Like that's how we would want to say that. Estuve, some of us would say estaba, which is fine. But like we want to use the verb estar, which is to be, when you're talking about a situation that happened in the past or somewhere where you found yourself. But what you should start doing, and a lot of native Spanish speakers do this a lot, is they use the verb encontrarse, which means to find oneself. And so instead of saying estuve en una situación muy dura hace 2 años o estuve en una situación muy fuerte hace 2 años. Si dije semanas, perdón. If I said weeks, forgive me. But instead of saying I was, a better way of saying that, what sounds more natural, again, you can say that, but what sounds a little bit more Spanishy is using the verb encontrarse, which means to find oneself. So it would be better to say, me encontré en una situación muy difícil hace 2 años. I found myself in a tough situation. If your grandson found himself in a great, like if your grandson, let's say, was in a great relationship, you could say, sí, mi nieto se encontró en una buena relación con esa muchacha. Mi nieto se encontró en una buena relación con esa muchacha. Okay, so using encontrarse, finding oneself, to describe one's state of being or how someone, just a situation that someone found themselves in, sounds a little bit better, a little bit more refined. One tip for storytelling is, instead of, a lot of times, you know, in English, a lot of times when we're telling stories, we like to say like, yeah, well, turns out, or it ended up being that, he wasn't really my cousin, he was actually a family friend, or it turned out, or it ended in a situation, you know, like that structure that we use in English a lot of times when we tell stories. A lot of times we want to translate those words directly from English to Spanish, and so we like to use verbs like terminar. And so we'll say like, terminó siendo una situación mala. Like it ended being a bad situation. And that's fine, but something that's very common that you're gonna hear native speakers say more often than not when they're telling stories and talking about the final outcome of something, they're going to say, resulta que él realmente era mi primo en vez de mi hermano. Resulta que is like, it turns out that, it ended up that, eventually it was that, like resulta que, even they say it like that, resulta, pero al final resulta que, da, da, da. Okay, so start sprinkling resulta que, which again is it turns out, or it ended up being, or, you know, start using resulta more often, and you'll improve your Spanish a lot. One thing that I had to learn I won't say recently, but last year, is there are certain verbs that if you use the word casi, which means almost, if you use that before a verb and you want to communicate the past tense, follow me. If I want to say I almost, and then follow almost with a verb, and this works for specific verbs, and I want to talk about the past tense, there are instances where you don't change those verbs to the past tense. I didn't know this until last year. I had a debate with one of my students from the Dominican Republic, because I was talking about somewhere that I went, and I said, casi me caí. And she looked at me like, ¿qué? Casi te caíste. Casi, no se, eso no se dice. She was like, we don't say that in Spanish. I'm like, yeah, I know, no. I was trying to tell her how the language works. Idiota, imbécil. Yo, no. And I was telling her like, hold on one second, car is staring at me. But no, yeah, I was telling her, I'm like, no. I was saying like, I almost fell down, all right? So casi me caí, right? Like I'm telling her, like, yeah, I was saying, no, I was communicating that I almost fell down. She's like, sí entiendo, pero aún así eso no se dice. You don't say that. And I'm like, what, really? You don't say that? I started to ask around. I'm on WhatsApp asking. ¿Se puede decir que casi me caí? And everyone told me, no, you can't, you don't say that. If you're saying, I almost fell, regardless of when it was, you're going to say, casi me caigo. And I'm like, even if it's the past tense, you say, casi me caigo. And caigo is the conjugation or the change for the verb caer, which means to fall, but in present tense, okay? And so even if 3 minutes ago, 3 days ago, 3 weeks ago, 3 years ago, okay, even if I almost fell in those past periods of time, and if you say the word casi, which is almost, you're going to say caigo, which is the present tense form of caer. That's something that you can incorporate into your Spanish that, again, will take away some of that weirdness. It will make us sound a lot more natural, a lot more native-like. We'll never reach that native level, true native level fluency, but more native-like. So don't say casi me caí, casi me caigo, ayer. I'm pretty sure, and again, I'm still learning, guys. 5 years, I'm still learning. I'm pretty sure this is the case for the verb morir también. Like if you're saying like, again, thank God nothing happened, but like when I got exposed to that carbon monoxide, I could have said casi me muero. I think I need to do some investigation after this, but I think I would say si hace un año o el año pasado casi me muero. I think I need to ask, but I think that would be another case of that. Still learning every day. I am. So yeah, keep that in mind. The next little phrase, little combination of words that you need to use is se me hace. Se me hace. Se me hace raro que tú nunca vienes a mi casa, pero siempre voy a la tuya. Se me hace raro que nunca vienes a mi casa, pero siempre voy a la tuya. Se me hace. Se me hace is a way of saying like, it seems to me. It gives me, like, se me hace, like, it seems to me, it occurs to me, it comes off to me like, se me hace, se me hace. Again, another example. Se me hace, I said raro already. Se me hace difícil conducir mientras como. Se me hace difícil conducir mientras como. Like, it comes off to me, it seems to me difficult to drive and eat at the same time, or drive while I eat. Se me hace is a very, I'm not sure if I explained that well, but that's something that you can include also. Like, se me, I don't even know how to translate that at all. Like, literally, that would be, it makes itself to me. I don't know. But yeah, something I was watching the other day, I'm really interested in going to Costa Rica. If you guys are curious about how I've been traveling so much lately, I can let you know how and why. I think I told you guys in a video before, but either way, I'm thinking about going to Costa Rica soon. And so I was watching some Costa Rican vlogs, and they were just like going through the central market and trying different foods. And one of the vloggers said, se me hace agua en la boca. Se me hace agua en la boca. Guys, guess what that means? Okay, so he's looking at food. He's like, oh, se me hace agua en la boca. Se me hace agua en la boca. I mean, I'd never heard that phrase in particular. Maybe I had, I don't know. But I was just like, oh, that's a cool way. I just immediately knew what he was saying. He was saying it makes my mouth water. But again, the way he said it was, se me hace agua en la boca. Ver ese plato. Like, seeing that plate makes my mouth water. Se me hace agua en la boca. Se me hace agua en la boca. No la bota. La bota's the boot. And water in your boot wouldn't be good. The next one, instead of saying, eso es difícil para mí, or, so if you want to communicate that something's difficult or hard for you, instead of saying, es difícil para mí hacer ejercicio, like, let's say working out is hard for you. Instead of saying, Es difícil para mí hacer ejercicio. Yes, you can say that. Like, it's okay to say that. But what would sound a little bit more elevated, not even advanced, just more natural, more native like, is to say, it costs me to work out, which would be, me cuesta hacer ejercicio. Me cuesta hacer ejercicio. Yeah, so as I was saying, instead of saying, es difícil para mí, you can say, it costs me, which communicates the same idea. So, me cuesta hacer ejercicio. Me cuesta dedicarme a mis estudios. It's like, literally that's, it costs me to stay dedicated to my studies, but it communicates the idea of studying is difficult for me. Me cuesta. Me cuesta manejar por mucho tiempo. Like, it's hard for me to drive for a long time. Me cuesta. You can also use that with different pronouns like te cuesta, le cuesta, nos cuesta, les cuesta. You guys get it, but I'm just using, the pronoun me so that you guys see the idea. The next one. So yeah, the next one is, instead of using the verb poder, which means to be able to, can, to describe when you're able to do something, cuando eres capaz de hacer algo. Think back to the example that I gave you with querer. Like, instead of saying, I want to eat ice cream, you could say, tengo ganas de comer helado. Instead of saying, quiero comer helado, tú puedes decir, tengo ganas de comer helado. Sorry. Instead of saying, what was I saying? Instead of saying, quiero comer helado, you can say, tengo ganas de comer helado. You can do the same with the verb poder and the verbs alcanzar y lograr. If you don't know, alcanzar means to reach. Sometimes it can mean to achieve. Lograr literally means to achieve. And so a lot of Spanish speakers do this. And I notice a lot of like Central Americans, Mexicans sometimes do this as well. But a lot of people do it, not just them. They'll say something like this. Like, if I say, I couldn't, I can't say, I'm thinking of an example. I can't say, I couldn't, let's say you wanted to say, let's say you're traveling and you wanted to say, I couldn't get to Bogota yesterday because I did not have time. Literally, if you translate couldn't, you would say, ayer no pude llegar a Bogotá porque yo no tenía el tiempo. Ayer no pude llegar a Bogotá porque no tenía el tiempo. But instead of saying pude, which is past tense for poder, you can change that to alcanzar, which I couldn't, like, it literally means like to reach or to like achieve, but you can literally use that for couldn't, okay? So you could say, instead of saying, yo no pude llegar a Bogotá ayer porque no tenía el tiempo, you can say, yo no alcancé llegar a Bogotá ayer porque no tenía el tiempo. You can also use the verb lograr, which literally means achieve. I know it's weird for us to think that achievement can be used to describe someone being able to do something, but they use this verb like that. So you can say, yo no logré llegar a Bogotá ayer porque no tenía el tiempo. So replacing, and again, you have to develop an ear for this so that you know the instances in which it sounds normal to replace these verbs and the instances when it would kind of sound a little weird, but a lot of times it's okay to interchange these. Again, not always. Like, you wouldn't say, like, for example, if you're describing something that you can do, like an ability, you wouldn't say, yo alcanzo tocar la guitarra. No. Like, you wouldn't say, I reach playing the guitar. You'd have to say, puedo tocar la guitarra. You'd have to say, I can. But there are instances where you can replace alcanzar, you can replace poder with alcanzar, and you can replace poder with lograr, which means both to achieve or to reach. The last thing that you should start incorporating into your Spanish, and it's something that's basic that a lot of us know, but like, to say that two people get along with each other, or like each other, a lot of times all we're exposed to is the structure of él me cae bien. Like, he falls well to me, or falls well on me, or falls well to me. And that is literally how you'll say, like, I like him, we get along. It really doesn't communicate that we get along, though. It communicates I like him, like, or he seems cool to me, he seems nice to me. Like, I vibe with him. I'm not literally translating word for word, but él me cae bien is like, he's cool people. Like, he's good vibes. I like him, okay? But to say that people get along with each other, like if I want to say, yeah, my cousins get along well, right? Get along with each other well. Like I wasn't really taught that. I had to just hear people say this, and then I learned it. But the way you can say that is llevarse bien. The reflexive verb llevar, and then put se at the end. Llevar solo isn't reflexive, sorry. Llevarse, which makes that verb reflexive. If you don't know what that means, I'm sorry. I don't like grammar, but you have to learn what that means. But llevarse bien. So I could say, mis primos se llevan muy bien. Mis primos se llevan muy bien. That literally means, like literally translated, that would be my cousins take themselves well, but that's how you say they get along. Like they're buddies, they're pals, they get along very well. Sí, ella y yo nos llevamos bien. Ella y yo nos llevamos bien. She and I, we get along well. That literally means we take each other well. Like that's how that would be translated, I guess. We take each other well. Depending on how you want to translate it, it could also mean we wear each other well, but that is how you can communicate in Spanish, that we get along, okay? And so that's another little phrase that you can start using and implementing that can refine your Spanish. These things are not crazy complex. Son cosas cotidianas. They're daily things. They're like regular things, regular occurrences in the Spanish language. But again, I just know that a lot of these things I was not aware of. And I just discovered them by peeling back the layers of Spanish versus being taught these things explicitly, which means that there can be some value in me creating a video where I explain these things explicitly. And so I hope this video has helped. If you guys have any video ideas that you'd like to see, let me know. I'm approaching 5 years speaking Spanish. Y todavía estoy enamorado. Qué loco. Llevo 5 años aprendiendo español y todavía estoy emocionado. Obviamente sube y baja, pues suben y bajan las ganas, pero ahora mismo estoy en una temporada, en una etapa en la que estoy enamorado con español, con las culturas. Tengo muchas ganas de viajar otra vez. Soy un tipo raro, chicos, pero pronto voy a salir, voy a lanzar, subir, mejor dicho, el video donde hablo de mi experiencia aprendiendo español por 5 años. Entonces, que estén pendientes del video y que este video les haya servido y que les haya gustado también. Nos vemos en el próximo video, chicos. Chao, hasta la próxima.